Hello. So today we will talk about Parashat Emor. Parashat Emor deals with several topics and starts off with halachot that have to do with the Kohanim, with the priests. But later on, it talks about the different holidays and how one brings different sacrifices, different for different holidays, and also has some other statements about sacrifices in general. And one of them is Sho Kesev Ki Valed, um, that basically it's in verse in chapter 22, verse 17, verse 27. It talks about the fact that you have to wait 7 days from when you from the point in which you have a newborn calf, and until you can shech that calf and bring it as a sacrifice. This is similar to the way that human beings are, that Jews are, that we only get the male children only get circumcised after 7 days on the 8th day. So similarly, also the animals cannot be sacrificed until after the 7th day. Now, this verse troubled Chazal a lot because it starts off by Sho Kesev Ki Valid, and in other words, talking about an ox that gets born. So oxen don't get born. You have a small, they get born as calves or other smaller, younger animals. They only grow up to be oxen. And so this tension between the moment of birth and the moment of becoming older generated a lot of Midrashim. This takes up a very, very large portion of the Midrashim in the Tanchuma for this week's Parsha. And we're going to talk about one of those. And we won't focus right now on how this is connected to the verse, which is in a bit of a roundabout way. We're more interested this time in the content of what it is that is said over here. So, recall that this is about a sacrifice, and not just any sacrifice, about a sacrifice that has to do with in other words, a person initiating sacrifice in order to thank God. So, Rabbi Tanchuma Patach, Rabbi Tanchuma, who is the rabbi after which the Tanchuma Midrash is named after, opened up with a verse from Eov, from the book of Job. And as you know, the book of Job talks about Job, who had this very long argument with God and with people that tried to represent God's position about justice in the world. Okay, this will be significant and important in what we talk about today. So there's a verse there where God reveals himself to Eov and tells Eov the following verse: Mi hikdimani va'ashalem tachat kol hashamayim lihu. Who comes before me that I shall pay him, for everything under the sky belongs to me. Ze ravak hadar b'mdina v'noten schar sofrim u'meshanim u'mishnayot. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, עלי לשלם לו שכר עמלו, ליתן לו בשכרו בן זכר. So, it's a bit of a strange interpretation here. We'll understand it better as we go along in the Midrash. But he says the following thing. What does this verse refer to? When the verse says, who comes before me that I shall pay him? After all, everything under the sky belongs to me. This is a single man who lives in a certain country and pays pays tuition for children he doesn't have. After all, he's single, never been married before, and so. But even though he pays tuition money to the state. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, God says, עלי לשלם לו שכר עמלו, ליתן לו בשכרו בן זכר. I will pay him for what he did to give him a child, to give him a son who will go to learn. So what is this Midrash talking about? It's talking about a situation where a man, in order to get God to appreciate him and to maybe help him find somebody to marry and then to have children, this man gives Um, okay. 1 second over here. Sorry about this. This is a little short. Yeah, I'm in the middle of my video. Okay, sorry about that. Once again, so this is about a man who is single, and in order to curry favor with God, he tries to, what he does is he basically behaves as if he had a child, and he pays the institutions in the country that support child education, and hopefully God will see his behavior and will appreciate it, and therefore give him as a prize or as a reward a child, so that he can basically pay for that education and for something real. Now, this is a bit strange because this seems to be at odds with the verse. Meaning now we understand what the verse is talking about. The verse is saying, everything under the sky belongs to me, says God. So who could come along and say that they come before me, they're existing prior to my creating the world, and therefore I owe them something. After all, everything that's in the world I created, so everything belongs to me, so how could they say that I owe them anything? And immediately afterwards, it says that God will pay this person, will reward this person for doing what he's doing, as if God owes that person. So all the commentators here explain that God is saying, even though I don't have to pay him, I will. So we'll get back to that in a moment. But then, to emphasize the first point, the Midrash continues, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, Atida bat kol liot mefotzetzet berashi harim. Bat kol, the echo of God in the world, is going to be shouting on the hilltops and saying, Kol mi shepa'alim el yavo ve'ito scharo. Anybody who thinks that they deserve a reward should come and claim it. Ve'ruach HaKodesh tzovachat ve'omeret. But God's Spirit calls out and says, Mi kdimani v'ashalem. Again, this verse from Yov. Who comes before me that I shall pay them? Before me in the chronological sense. Who precedes me that I need to owe them anything? Miki les lefanai ad shelo natati bo neshama. Who praised me before I gave them a soul? In other words, a person who comes and says, well, I daven every day. Well, God says, yes, but I've already given you a reward for that. I've given you a soul to allow you to daven. Mi mal lefanai ad shelo natati lo ben zachar. If you want to come along and say that you did milah, that you circumcised your son, well, that's only because I already gave you a reward prior to that. I gave you a child. You owe me. Mi asa lefanai tzitzit ad shelo natati lo talit. Who made tzitzit before I gave him a piece of clothing to do tzitzit and put tzitzit in? Mi asa ma'akeh ad shelo natati lo gag. Mi asa sukkah ad shelo natati lo makom. Mi הפריש לי פאה עד שלא נתתי לו שדה. מי הפריש תרומה ומעשר עד שלא נתתי לו גורן. מי הקריב לפני קורבן עד שלא נתתי לו בהמה. So, a list of things where you see there each of them is a mitzvah, some good deed that a person does, like bring a sacrifice, like give charity, and a person comes and says, in this hypothetical situation, I deserve a prize. I'm special. I did something that's out of the ordinary, and therefore I went out of my way to do your will, God. And God says, well, I'm sorry, but you think you deserve some sort of special reward for that. I preceded you in this, because you would never have been able to do this mitzvah without me helping you in advance, without me giving you in advance the tools to do that. I gave you a son so you could do circumcision. I gave you a beast so you could sacrifice it. I gave you crops so you can give them to tzedakah. Okay? So this is emphasizing that first verse in Yov, saying, who dares demand of me anything? After all, everything in the world is already mine. So I've actually given everybody things to begin with. And this is very suitable for the discussion in Yov, in the book of Job, because part of Job's claims is to say, I did all these great deeds, and God says to him, according to this Midrash, it says, who are you to come along and demand a reward, everything that you have came from me to begin with. So, you're starting from a very big minus. So what we have over here really seems to be so. To summarize, like the question we have here is, first of all, what is the deep meaning of this statement of God beyond what we understand intuitively? And second of all, if this is all true, what does that mean? That even though this is all true, God is willing to sort of flip his perspective, and to that person who is single and pays money to education when he has no children, he will reward him with a child. A second ago, we just said that that doesn't work that way. God can say here too, who do you think gave you that money, right? That money comes from me. So don't come along and and wave it and say, hey, look what I did. You didn't do anything special. I gave you the money. So how dare you come along and demand any kind of reward for it? So what does it mean that in the end God adopts sort of the opposite perspective if it's the wrong perspective, if it's not true? So in order to understand what's happening over here, what we really see here is some sort of an argument taking place, a hypothetical argument between God and man, where there's sort of a chicken and egg question, right? Man is saying, look, I had all this money, and look what I did with it. I used it for all sorts of things. And God is saying, yeah, but where do you think you got the money, right? I gave you the money. So, your initiative is only covering, what you owe me from before by having that money. And in fact, every initiative that you use, right? Who gave you a soul? Who gave you the ability to have this initiative? And so, even though we have some sort of a chicken and egg question over here of what precedes what, right? In the sense, who comes first in this balance, right? Because we can also, the question a lot of times in these systems is, where do you start counting, right? You could start counting from a person doing circumcision and saying, oh, look what a wonderful action he's done, and then the next step is God rewards him with money, and then he takes the money and gives to tzedakah, and God rewards him with crops, and then and so on and so on. Or you can say, no, God gave him a child, so he did circumcision. Then God gave him money, so he gave it for tzedakah. So it really is a question of where you decide to start counting. But it's really a false question. There is no question. This is what God is saying. Mi hikdimani v'ashalem, who comes before me? There is no real question of who comes first. Of course God comes first. He created the world. Therefore, naturally, he is the one who wins this argument, right? And there's it's not really ever a question. There's no sort of mystery about the answer. Of course God comes first. So, in that sense, God is coming along and saying something that's very obvious. But especially because of that, it's very interesting that God is saying, but even though this is the truth, I am willing to adopt, in a sense, man's perspective. Because once man is created, only once he has awareness does he think about, oh, now I need to do stuff, right? So from man's perspective, from man's limited perspective, it's the other way around. It's, I had the world is a given, my life is a given, and now it's a question of what I do with it. So I'm the initiator, and now I come along and say, God, look what I've done. Look how I've taken initiative to do the right things. So we have here God's perspective, which is for sure the true perspective, and there is no question there. And then he adopts man's perspective. So what does that mean? I think that what we have here is one of the classic sort of issues of between din and lachamim. Between din, which we've talked about before, din means like the law, sort of the truth, versus lachamim, versus mercy. This division, which expresses itself many times in the Torah in the name of God, Elokim, and Yud Kei Vav Kei, the two names of God that appear very commonly in the Torah, has din reflecting sort of what is true, what is the right thing, and sort of like natural law, regular patterns that are applied equally to all. It's like it's judgment, it's truth, it's equality, and then there's lachamim, mercy, where there's more, and mercy also connects a lot to God's sort of like, personal attention to each person. Because mercy we dispense, individually, depending on the individual you're talking to. Whereas judgment is given equally. There should be, judges should be blind to all sorts of factors because they have to dispense truth and justice. Now, I think that the two perspectives here correspond to that, because from a din perspective, man is nothing. Man doesn't really exist from a din perspective. God is infinite. God overtakes all. And so man gets completely erased in God's presence. Yeah, and that's what we see over here. Man, if you look back enough, man doesn't exist before a certain point in time, whereas God exists at all points in time, past and future and present. And so, from a din perspective, there's no question. So, but in a sense, this is, I think, the point. From a din perspective, the world doesn't exist. Creation doesn't exist. The world, creation, it's all, framed within a certain timeline. And, go beyond it in the past or in the future, and it disappears. So it doesn't really exist. It's only a small, blip on the screen of eternity. And it doesn't really exist, it goes to zero once you look at it from an eternal perspective. God is the only thing that really exists in this context. And so, because God wins the argument so easily, because God is completely right, and it's so clear that from a judgment, din, a rigorous, analysis perspective, God is right. He's so right that the world shouldn't even exist, by any rational sense. We should all be subsumed automatically by God's, eternity. And then God decided, to make this miracle called existence, called the universe, called life, and create something out of that nothingness that was everything that wasn't Him. And He gave us something that is even more amazing, which is free choice. He gave us the ability to make decisions. But God, to do that, had to choose lachamim. He had to choose, the mercy. He had to say, even though there is nothing that really exists, I'm going to behave as if it does. And I'm going to generate a world where, from the perspective of those who live in it, the world exists. That's only through mercy. That's only through God saying, I don't care about what's right and about what's true, meaning, of course, He cares. But He goes beyond that and says, even though I know what is true, even though this truth will never change, I want to create an illusion that will be so strong that it will be also its own kind of truth. But in order to do that, He has to adopt a position of mercy and saying, I want to make something special, something that's not, doesn't go by the rigorous philosophical truth that nothing can exist by God. How does He do this? This is a big mystery. This is what the mystics deal with. This is what's called the Soda Tzimtzum, the secret of God somehow, making room for something that is not Him. But but God, by creating the world, is saying basically, I am moving to this other perspective. And so, because of that, He's not saying, now that I've made that shift, I am willing to look at it from the human perspective and treat it that way. And if a person says, I want to have a child, and so I'm going to go out of my way to use my funds for child raising, even when I have no child, I will reward him with a child, because from that person's perspective, from this limited perspective of the world exists and things are, and now you use your free choice, which also is an illusion, but it's an important illusion that we have. You use your free choice to do things. I reward that free choice because you had that choice and you made the choice of what to use your stuff with. Now, to end up, I think what we have to realize is that it's not that one perspective is the only one that we take. In fact, this Midrash is trying to say exactly the opposite. What this Midrash is trying to say, I think, is that God has decided to, for His own purposes, in order to give us room to be, and not to be crushed by this, by the debt that we owe Him for even creating us. God has been willing to adopt a position of mercy, and to take the world and our action in that perspective. But we can't adopt that position. we have to realize that this is all an illusion, and that in truth God owes us nothing, and that all we are doing is just repaying to Him a minuscule amount of the debt that we owe Him. And so the Midrash is saying, first of all, let's clear the playing field over here. Let's clear things up. I owe you nothing, says God. I do not owe you nothing. I do not owe you anything. You owe me. By definition, I come before you, therefore you owe me. Everything that you have comes from me. Don't even think of it otherwise. But once we agree on that, says God, I'm willing to come towards you. And so really what we have here is that God wants a relationship with us. He wants us to have a relationship with Him. And the best way to have a relationship is for each person to, instead of each person trying to guard their own position, their own rights, is to go the other way around. Say, I have a debt towards you. I have a commitment towards you. And this commitment is expressed here in this Midrash by us saying, we accept, God. We owe you everything. You are the one who created the world. We owe you all of our existence. We are always in debt to you. And God says, okay, once you accept that, I'm willing to accept your perspective too. And treat you like you see yourselves. If you treat me like I see myself, which is of course the truth, yes, I will treat you like you see yourself, which is your own limited perspective of the world and of existence. That's okay, that's how I created you. But I will adopt that if you adopt my perspective. And so we have this beautiful reversal of roles that's expressive of that wish for a relationship, for a two-way street between God and man. Shabbat Shalom.